Who is George Russell's biggest inspiration while growing up?
That's a great question. My biggest inspiration growing up was my older brother, Benji. Benji's 10 years older than me. He used to be a racing driver, and I was always sort of following in his footsteps. And I always wanted to be like my big brother. So, when I was 5 years old, dreaming of racing, the first time I got into a go-kart when I was 7, I always wanted to be like my brother.
What was the exact particular moment, if you recall, that made you realize that, okay, hold on, that's my path. This is where I want to go.
I've known nothing else other than the racing. As I said, my brother's 10 years older than me, so I was grown up on the racetrack. I think I was less than 6 months old the first time I went to a go-kart track. I had a quad bike when I was 2 years old. I then had a pedal tractor. I used to pedal around all of the go-kart tracks when my brother was racing. So it was always kind of destiny. Like I was always destined to go racing. There wasn't an exact moment where I was like, this is the sport for me. It's just in my blood. There was no other option.
George, today you're one of the biggest athletes in the world. And a lot of the athletes that we see today, they're very good at their job as athletes. They're very good at pursuing that. But then there's the element that is very important in today's world, which is social media, that they would leave behind, or they would rely on a lot of other people to handle it for them. However, in your case, I see that you have prioritized social media, specifically Instagram. We see you being very active on Instagram. We see you have built such a large community of fans. So what do you actually like the most about our platform?
I think the direct engagement you have with the fans and recognizing that the fans make the sport. If it wasn't for the fans, Formula One wouldn't be what it is today. No sport would be what it is. And that was so evident during the pandemic, especially at the racetracks themselves when the grandstands were empty, even though we were still racing and the adrenaline never changes, it felt a little bit soulless. And I think the mentality we all have now is that we feel we really need to give back to those who love what we are doing. And I feel that is only fair because they are the ones who are almost effectively giving us that opportunity to do what we love, get paid to do what we love. I mean, we're so fortunate.
And if I were to tell you today within your community, obviously Instagram provides this tool where you can read comments, where you can interact via DM. What would be George Russell's way to engage with his community on the platform?
I think giving authentic posts to the fans. I think this is something that I've learned, and I'm trying to find that balance because I've always been a professional. I've always wanted to sort of lead by example, not only for sort of my fans, but also with my team, just trying to push everybody forward. And I never wanted to be this jokey individual who is perceived to not take things seriously, even though I do have fun with myself quite a lot. And I, enjoy having a laugh because that's so important. But recognizing authenticity, content that fans can't find anywhere else, I think is absolutely key, and showing a lens of which they may not have expected, because what you see on the television or what you see on Netflix, that is not entirely how things are. And the fact is, I'd say all 20 F1 drivers, we're just normal people. But I remember when I was a kid looking up to a Formula One driver, especially when I was queuing up for Lewis Hamilton's autograph. You see him as a superhero. and almost wanted to touch him because you don't think he's real. But
Followers on a journey with you, let them feel connected. These are always best practices when it comes to Instagram, and we see you adapting them. It's just such a great highlight, and you're leading for real by example for a lot of other athletes, content creators, public figures. So thank you so much for doing that. If I were to ask you, is there any memorable interaction or a post that you've had on the platform with either a fan, other athletes, or a public figure? Would there anything that would come to your mind?
There's definitely a number of things that come to my mind. I remember we did a collab with Ed Sheeran after I took him for a hot lap in Miami, and he was genuinely petrified after this lap. And I'll always remember giving him a hug after, and he was drenched in sweat from that. And Ed is an individual who I've been listening to his music since I was in my teenage years, and then it feels surreal to have been taking him on a lap around the track, and then sharing an Instagram post together, and the same as which we did with Novak Djokovic. I've got to know Novak really well over the last couple of years, Roger Federer, even Fernando Alonso. From the moment I started watching Formula One, Fernando was already a two-time world champion, and sharing a plane with him, traveling to a race. And there was a great video we posted together of playing some ping pong on the plane to pass the time on a 11-hour flight from Mexico City to Sao Paulo. So there's been so many moments that come into my mind on this journey that I've always wanted to share with the fans, because it just shows a totally different light on our relationships, the cross-sport dynamic between athletes, but also between sectors, the music industry and the racing industry.
George, if you were to leave our audience with one piece of advice, what would that be? Take your time, think of the right answer, consider all the elements of our audience and their needs. But I think people look up to people like you, and they seek that, like, what would George do? How would George act? So what would be one piece of advice that you would give your audience today?
When I was growing up, and as I touched on before, I was racing with my parents, and they were putting so much into my career. I never wanted to let my parents down, especially my father. I always wanted to make him proud. I never wanted to make mistakes. And it came to a point when I was slightly older, I recognized I wasn't pushing myself to my true limits because I was scared of making a mistake. I would have preferred to have not made a mistake and maybe finished slightly lower down the order than making that error, going for the big result. And I realized that was wrong. And when I changed my mentality and I started pushing myself more and I started making mistakes, it was so difficult in the moment, but I became a better person from those mistakes, from those failures. I became a better racing driver from those failures. So my biggest advice is don't be afraid to fail. We need to fail to progress as people, as friends, as partners, as professionals. And that is the biggest lesson I've had so far on my journey.
That's so nice. I think everyone in here needed to hear that today. George, I want to thank you so much for your time with us today, sharing such incredible insights, being so humble and sharing all about your dreams and your aspirations and your advice. I really can't wait to see you in action this season. Instagram and the entire team in here will be cheering you on all year long. Thank you.
Thank you so much.